I'll try this, and if it starts to squawk, I'll turn it off. I feel like Dan does. I could, anyone pretty much that I know in the audience could sit up here and do this, I think. So I'm gonna be fairly brief. But Access, as most of you know, is the community action agency in Jackson County. We're part of the original 1964 War on Poverty, still losing.
Wow. Slogan.
Right. And essentially, we serve low-income residents with basic needs. We feed, house, warm, and educate. They're kind of our priorities. We have an annual budget of between 7 and 8 million most years, unknown what it will be next year. The majority of this funding does come from governments, and most of that from the federal government. Some from state, a little bit from county, a little bit from municipalities. But the majority of that is federal money. We do raise about $1 million a year out of the community in private donations, which gives us a fair amount of flexibility that not all agencies have. Last year we helped about 17,000 families. The majority of those families are working people. This is one of the great myths about American poverty, that we've got a bunch of people laying around in hammocks collecting their government checks and drinking beer. But the truth is, 3/4 of our people work full or part-time. Most of the rest of them would work if they could. Either they can't find employment or they have various challenges, physical, family, otherwise, that prevent them from working. But obviously the majority of these folks are working minimum wage jobs. Minimum wage simply doesn't, there's a big gap between basic common expenses. I'm talking nothing fancy here, not the big flat screen TVs and the gambling casinos that we hear about in the newspapers. This is rent, basic transportation, food, utilities, and a little tiny bit occasionally of medical care. That's it. No clothing, no entertainment, none of the stuff the rest of us take for granted. We just did a presentation actually to the Access Board. Many of these folks have been on our board for 15, some cases 20 years. And we showed them graphically exactly where that budget goes. With a family with 2 working adults on minimum wage or 1 working adult with a child or 2, the ends just don't meet anymore. So, as I like to say, the safety net is not a hymn. And actually, I just happened to come across this study this morning. Salvation Army just put out fairly recently this report. It's called Perceptions of Poverty, and they did a national survey and just asked Americans a lot of questions about their perceptions of poverty, what they think about people who are in poverty. And it surfaced some very interesting things. One of the things that surfaced is that there's a great overestimation in some ways of the number. Some people think 1/3 of the American public is in poverty. A lot of us feel that way. But the reality, at least according to the way we set the bar for poverty, which is, highly debated in this country, is about 18–19% of the population meets that guideline. But of course, they surfaced all the myths. 50% of Americans think if you have a work ethic, you'll never be poor. And then there's the laziness and the, doing all the wrong things, immoral, this, that, and the other. But also, the report surfaced that Americans are very generous. We certainly experience this here in the community. 60% of all Americans give something to charity, and the higher the income ladder, the higher that percentage goes, and the donations range from small to big. But we are a generous community. We do want to help people who need help. You see that every time there's a story on the front page of the paper, the outpouring that comes. So it's a little bit at war with our stinginess about this thing we call government, at the same time that we really do want to help people who need help, by all appearances. So what are some kinds of things we do? Well, last year in 2011, we weatherized 268 homes. We do low-income housing weatherization. We do everything from a new roof, new windows, insulation, duct sealing, so forth and so on. We did 9,000 households. We pay heating bills for 9,000 households, and we pay every kind of heat. We pay wood, propane, electric, gas, anything you can think of that people in Jackson County use to heat their homes. 7,000 households got emergency food boxes through our food pantry network. We run 25 food pantries. And 237 households got special help from our senior, and disabled outreach programs. Just a small example. As Deanne said, never enough resources to help everybody, never have been. But in the last couple of years, it's important to understand we haven't actually had a federal budget. We've had a whole series of continuing resolutions and negotiated settlements, and but nobody's actually managed to pass. And that's going to happen again this year because of the election. There will be no budget passed this year. There are all these committees meeting and having their little negotiations about how basically they pull up what they did last year and they start whacking on it. There are lots of proposals floating. The Obama administration has proposed a budget. The House of Representatives has proposed several. There have been ideas floating in the Senate. I will have to say this is not partisan. I don't attribute this to any one party. I'm kind of with her, but it doesn't matter what the party is. But the proposals coming out of the House are quite draconian with regard to the programs that low-income people depend upon. Two of the most successful programs by all measures in terms of alleviating the conditions of poverty are SNAP, what we used to call food stamps, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and unemployment insurance. Two programs that are under great attack right now in terms of continuation. And SNAP in particular, this one kind of just mystifies me, but proposals ranging, from small percentages to large percentages of cuts. The most recent House proposals that were passed, one is called the Ryan budget, and there's another one similar, would cut that program to the point where hundreds of thousands of people would be deprived of benefits, and by one estimate, every single family that receives that program would have their benefits cut, and half those people are children. So we're literally talking about taking food out of the mouths of hungry kids. And again, in the current House budgets that have been passed, weatherization would be eliminated completely. One of these programs, such as the ones that Deanne mentioned, completely done away with. Energy programs are proposed for a 1/3 reduction. In our county, that would mean 3,000 fewer households, just to say a number. We do run a commodity supplemental food program, which is kind of it comes up for deliberation, may or may not be cut. I think Gailey's is familiar with that program. It's basically for seniors. We give a box of supplemental food to about 350 seniors every month. That one's on the chopping block. So at Access, we've literally begun to ask this thought question: what do we do when the government goes away? What do we do? What kind of community do we have? How do we live together? How do we help each other? Like Deanne, I don't yet have the full answer. But really, the support that we've agreed to give one another as citizens, we call government. And if we take it away, it's a real open question what happens. A lot of people are saying, well, the churches will pick up the slack. And a large national church network just came out with a report where they said, I think if you combine every dollar that every charity and every church spends just on feeding the hungry, it's 6% of what the federal government spends. So if you take away the government support completely, we're going to have a lot of hungry people, if not starving people. Oh, this was the other statistic I liked, 335. If the churches had to make up the difference, this report says there are 335 religious congregations in the United States. I have no idea if that's an accurate number, but it sounds good. Each one of those would have to give $50,000 to match what would be lost if government no longer supports the hungry. I agree with Deanne to the point about the point that I don't think government is the answer. At the same time, as a citizen, I have to say I don't think doing away with government is something we can not fight either. So I do it with my pocketbook to the extent I can, with my votes to the extent they matter. But I agree about new solutions, new ideas. We do everything from growing our own food to figuring out different forms of economically supporting one another. But fundamentally, I think government has to be a piece of the picture, or we are no longer a democracy. So I'll stop there. Let's see, who's next? C.
Hi, everybody.